Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we will take a look at some new revenge content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, Cheating Ex Says Bye to His Car and Hello to Double Child Support. First, the child support. So, I was with my ex-husband for about 10 years. When I first met him, he knocked up his previous girlfriend before meeting me, basically kind of ghosted her. Now reflecting back on what happened, convinced me it was her keeping him away from his kid and that he was just the poor victim in all of it. She had taken him to court, got child support for tilde $324 a month for a while, then tried to take him back to get it increased cause she thought he was working and making more, but it backfired, and it got reduced to $112 a month. It stayed like that for about 6 to 7 years, and he actually got behind a couple of times just paying this because he'd lose a job here or there. One of the many ways he convinced me to move out of my home state to his was by telling me that there are more jobs in his home state and that the cost of living is cheaper. Come 2018, I decided to leave him because he wasn't putting in the effort to find a job that would support both of us while I went to nursing school. I had been working the same full-time federal government job and doing school part-time, our entire relationship supporting us while he went to school for medical billing and coding and didn't do anything with it once he was done. His excuse was, they're outsourcing these jobs to India. He bounced from one job to another for one reason or another. Once it came time for me to actually finally apply to a nursing program, I told him he needed to finally step up. He told me he would but never said what he was doing. He would come home from work and complain about the work and the people he worked with. He was eventually fired from that job because his boss said he worked way too slow, and he was delaying orders going out for the company. We also had a bit of a dead bedroom, so that also pushed me to want to leave him. I finally decided to leave, and the ex moved in an ex-roommate a couple of months later. She had lived with us previously because she found out her first husband had cheated on her. We had decided to help her get on her feet, and she met her second husband, then moved out. Why is this important? Because 4 months after I left, I found emails with nudes of this ex-roommate that my ex was forwarding to a secret email account that I had no clue about. They had been a lot more friendly than I had realized for over 4+ years. The ex-roommate, who was currently living in our marital home, was separate from her second husband because my ex didn't like him in the house. Granted, I didn't like him either cause he was a sleazebag who was also cheating on her, but I digress. My ex even got friendly with his ex-wife, I was wife number 2, and a third person I didn't recognize. Then I found out my ex knocked up the roommate 2 months after being official. I didn't get to confront my ex or her with this, other than me writing an email and attaching the photos I now had. I had to do something else. So, I reached out to my ex's girlfriend who he had his first child with. He's made no effort to be in his kid's life, a source of fights for us here and there, and I tried a few times over the years of reaching out to her and establishing a relationship between them. My mom has a bigger relationship with a kid that she has no relation to than my piece of crap ex. I told her I left him, that he was making way more money at his job, and that she should file to have it looked at. She did and got it increased to $264 a month. Now for the repo of the car. After I left, he decided to buy a brand new Chevy Equinox for over $32,000. I have access to his Credit Karma account, so that's how I know. He works commission-based sales selling furniture, TVs, and appliances. He doesn't bring home much. He actually opened a credit card through his work, bought $5,000 worth of stuff to furnish the house, then let it go to collections. He used my contact info, and they called me trying to collect on it. The payments on that new car were about $634 a month. He made 2 payments then stopped. Now we had bought a house together before I left, and he finally agreed to sell our marital home after getting behind on the payments and not doing what he needed to keep it. We had over 60% equity in the house. He decided to use his half of the sale to buy a smaller house outright instead of paying off his debt. His logic has always been, if I don't have a house payment, the other bills are affordable. This was part of the reasoning he used to bully me into buying our previous house. Either way, I found out his new address, called the company that originated the loan, and updated them with his current information. So, hopefully they'll be picking up their car any day now. Next one is titled, "Try to Keep Us Living in a Mold-Infested House? We'll Get Your Place Condemned." I had recently moved into a house with 2 other girls. It wasn't the best house, but it seemed to look okay for a college apartment. One of the girls had a friend who had lived there before and told us that the landlord was sexist and kind of a dick but usually meant well, and it was decent rent. I'll be referring to him as Dumbass Landlord. We were all broke, so we decided to sign a lease. I should have realized the warning signs when Dumbass Landlord wanted to sign it in a big boys after he had just eaten dinner there, and the leasing agreement looking like he chopped it up from other pictures of lease agreements on Google. We also found this apartment as an ad off of Craigslist. Things were fine for a few months. I was living alone until the next school year would start and wasn't home all the time since I would go over to my boyfriend's a lot and sleep over. It was a split house with an apartment in the basement and ours on the first floor. It wasn't long until I started to notice things happening. We'd get a good amount of rain since we were in the Midwest by some big, local lakes, and it was springtime. We'd get a good amount of water, and the concrete steps to the house would consistently fill up with water that I had to jump over, and it would disappear overnight. It also started to get a little bit of a musty smell in the house, and I had started coughing and sneezing all the time but didn't know why. Soon, the other girls moved in, and we started having some difficulties with Dumbass Landlord. He wouldn't tell us when he'd come over to check on the property. He said he did this to keep up on looks and mow the lawn, but he did it way too often for any of us to be okay with. He would argue with us about having a copy of our own lease. He'd yell at us to give him rent payments in cash, especially before going to his cabin up north with his girlfriend. But the biggest of all was that we were having problems with mold, and he did not care. For a while, we hadn't talked to the people in the basement apartment until everyone started having problems with Dumbass Landlord. We'd hear them arguing and yelling down below about as often as we would upstairs. But they were in a hellhole. Everything they owned had mold growing on it. They had bugs everywhere. Earwigs, beetles, ants, you name it. They were constantly throwing away their clothes, dishes, furniture, even their college papers, and homework since it was all growing mold. They spent money on plastic bins to hold most of their important items, but even those would get moldy. We also found out that they were supposed to have another roommate down below, but she couldn't live there because of her allergies to mold after signing a lease agreement. We also found out that Dumbass Landlord verbally abused her and her mother on the phone to the point where they were crying, and she couldn't get out of the lease. She ended up paying for 2 places every month so that she didn't have to live there because he wouldn't let her break her lease and didn't care. Upstairs wasn't as bad as the basement, but it wasn't good either. All of us were coughing more and more each month. We would wake up coughing in the middle of the night, and we were getting really sick. We tried to air out the house as best we could, but nothing helped. I ended up getting a severe case of strep throat so bad that every swallow I took made my eyes water and made me verbally make noise from the pain. I tried to ask the doctor I went to if he could prove that this was from mold later, but unfortunately, he couldn't give me a solid statement on it. Me, being a vocal, neutral good person who was also going to school to be an architect, tried to explain to him what was going on in the house. No air circulation, and his concrete steps and foundation walls were not sealed, so all of the water I'd have to jump over was most likely going into the basement walls, causing most all of the mold. We also found a few areas on the roof that needed patching, since we noticed some leaks, among other things. And the basement apartment had cheap patio doors for their only means of entrance and exit, which would consistently be up against water when it rained, adding to the problem. Oh, smart Dumbass Landlord decided that we were all just girls complaining about silly things that didn't mean anything, so he brushed us off and said we were fine, even though I had told him that I was learning about these things in school and knew what I was talking about. He wouldn't let us out of the lease as hard as we tried. So, all of us girls in both apartments decided we would get out if it was the last thing we did. Then began researching all of the legal apartments and tenant information for our state and city to get out. We were paying for attorney fees, started taking pictures of the mold upstairs and downstairs that we could find, talking with several different city staff and police, and started compiling this into a nice document. After deferring my rent payment to get a copy of the lease agreement from dumbass landlord, we could finally take a look at our legal document and use that further to get out. We were also working with another landlord at a rental company in town, who I will call good-ass landlord. He was, thankfully, doing his best to get us out of the shithole and into his apartment. Through him, we'd get all of the legal ins and outs of the renting business, and he would help us find a loophole. Then, after months and months of arguments, money, and researching, we found it. If we sent in a mold test to a research lab, and it was over the limit of what was inhabitable, we could get out. It was safe to say that we had a pretty good idea it was over the limit. The tests came back a few days later, and we sent that off to the city, including our nice document of pictures, statements, and leasing agreements. Not even 4 hours went by, and we got a call from the city. Our house was so full of mold that we were to move out of the apartment within 24 hours, and it was to be condemned. We were ecstatic. All of that hard work had finally paid off, although it was horrifying to know that the mold count was so high that the mold researcher who had been in the business for more than 30 years had not once seen a place with higher mold count than this house. Yes, this included black mold. Fast forward to us happily packing up in our house, all of our parents getting us out together, us moving into the apartment that good-ass landlord kept open for us to move into, and poor, old, dumbass landlord sobbing in our driveway as we happily stack boxes into cars, complaining that he should have paid more attention and listened to us, that this was his girlfriend's property, and that she's going to dump him. We all took a picture the next day, smiling in front of the condemned signs. It's still one of my favorite pictures to this day. Serves him right for not listening to his tenants. As for the aftermath of it all, apparently, the city knew about a lot of shady things he did. When we spoke to them, it seemed like he was an eye-roll landlord. They all knew of other problems he had with tenants, but no one had been able to do anything about it until us. He'd sneak his way out of things since it was a really small town. Unfortunately, there weren't a lot of rules set in place for bad landlords, unless they did something really illegal, which is why we had a really hard time getting out of there. Also, about a year or so later, I saw more college students living there again. We're pretty sure he did one of those at-home mold testing kits to get it up for sale again or fought the city somehow. I don't know what he ended up renovating, other than he ripped out a lot of carpet. I felt bad for those new people. I just wish them the best and hope they don't have as bad of an experience as we did. I wish it had turned out differently in the end, but I hope he learned his lesson to actually help his tenants when they need it. I don't hate the guy, but I think he has some things to work out for himself. Some people are also asking why we didn't sue. We could have, but it wasn't worth the money and time since we were all graduating in a few months and broke from speaking with lawyers. We did see what we could do about it, though. We just decided that getting out of the house and cutting ties would be the best instead of dragging the situation out further. Last one is titled, "Spend the money I gave you for bills? Criminal justice will be served." The background. I lived with a group of people who I thought were my friends. They were two couples, and we all lived in the same house for almost 2 years until I recently moved out. There were David and Tina, and Brittany and AJ. I was the only single person there. There was a debate on how we should pay the bills, but we all decided to give the money to the person whose name was on the bill. David paid the mortgage, Tina paid the water and electric, gas, and I paid the internet. It came to the point where I was paying close to 80% of the mortgage by myself, the entire water bill, about 75% of the gas and electric, and I was paying the internet bill by myself. I was giving the money still to the person in charge of the bill but came to find out about that 10 days before I moved out that the mortgage was defaulted on, and the house was in foreclosure. Also, the water, gas, and electric bills were in constant threat of being shut off and that the only up-to-date bill was the internet. While they all saw me struggle to pay these off, they were mindlessly spending money during the day, which is when I sleep due to working third shift, so I never saw the mindless things they spent money on, nor did I ever see the mail since they grabbed it before I woke up. Brittany never paid anything as she was having her check garnished due to unpaid student loans, but she always had expensive makeup. AJ never held a job for more than 2 weeks, and David and Tina were always calling into work, knowing that I wouldn't allow them to go without a home due to our history. One day, I woke up while they were all out and about doing something or other, so I went to go check the mail as I was expecting a package when I saw the bills in the mail, so I decided to investigate. I opened up the gas and electric bill, as they are by the same company, to see a total amount of almost $400 and being at risk of being shut off. I was shocked and pissed. I knew right then and there what was going on, and I vowed to screw them over as hard as I could. The revenge. I had just interviewed for a new job that paid almost double what I was making, and I knew that I interviewed well with them, so I told myself that if I got the job, I would give them a 30-day notice and move out, and as it was close to the end of the month, and I had already paid them, I would be moving out before the 1st of February. I got the call with the job offer the next day, which I happily accepted. I did the paperwork for the background check, and it all came back clean. The same day I accepted the offer, I typed out a 30-day notice and recorded myself, with my phone in my breast pocket, handing it to them, explaining that I was moving out. I started my job and my hunt for an apartment close to my new job, which I found within a week of starting. I took almost the entirety of my checks, set them aside for rent, deposit, and basic things that I would need. I was asked several times to help with the next month's bills, to which I said no, as I was saving for my own place and that they had plenty of time to come up with the money between the 4 of them because I was doing it all by myself pretty much on a meager pay rate of $11 an hour before my new job. There were a lot of scowls, passive-aggressive behavior, and flat-out attempts to take or use my things or foods without permission. The day came when I finally went and got my U-Haul and had a few friends help me move. Free drinks and free lunch are the best payment ever, as they shared it all with me. I was determined to get it all in one go, so I got the biggest one they had, and we got everything packed up. I took everything that was mine down to my pizza stone, which they loved, my expensive kitchen knives which they would use and never clean, even my toilet paper that I had bought 3 days prior because I needed it. A few rolls went missing very quickly. After moving everything, I sat down on my couch, looked around, my cat in my lap, and breathed a sigh of relief. I happened to be good friends with my previous neighbors, we smoked each other out frequently, and asked them to keep an eye out for anything out of the ordinary. 4 days go by, and I come to find out that the gas, electric, and water have all been turned off, and they were asked to fill up some buckets to manually flush the toilets, bathe in, etc., etc. Now, both couples have dogs, which my cat hated as they were both hyperactive as hell, but I loved them. So I decided that those dogs were in a dangerous situation as they had no water, no heat in the middle of winter, and probably no food as I had bought the last bag about 2 weeks prior. I hate to see an animal hungry. So I called the local humane society and left an anonymous tip about the dogs and how I was worried about them. The next day, my neighbor, Todd, texted me telling me that the dogs were removed from the home, that my previous housemates were being charged with neglect, and because of the lack of utilities, that these were not civil but criminal charges. This was enough for me to smile, but I wanted more. I knew that David was divorced and had a child. I also knew that he wasn't paying child support. I then contacted the local courts and made them aware of the flagrant non-support and that maybe they could help the agency looking for him. I provided the address that we lived at and informed them that the homeowner was the one who was being looked for. From there, it came to light that he was almost $25,000 behind, which is a felony in the state where I live. He is now living with someone on their couch, as Tina left him, The house has been foreclosed on, and he has nothing to his name while facing multiple criminal charges. Moral of the story: don't take advantage of a friend who knows all your dirty secrets. Thanks for listening.